There was a moment after, I moved to Ghana when I realized, should I say something uncomfortable? I had completely misunderstood the country that I thought I knew. And the funny thing in all of this, it wasn't even the food that I misunderstood, it was not the language, it was not the fact that Ghana and Nigeria are close, you know, close neighbors, kind of. I would say it was something much smaller, something that I kept seeing everywhere. But the fact that I kept seeing it everywhere did not mean that I understood it, not till I started living, right here in Ghana. When you move to another country, you are definitely going to arrive that country with expectations. This is you thinking that you know what you are getting into. I was coming from Nigeria, so naturally I assumed that Ghana wouldn't feel any different. And this is because in my mind I was like, after all, Ghana, Nigeria, we are all West Africans. We eat almost the same food. We have similar family structures. We speak English. So it was only normal that, in my mind, I was thinking, how different can this, really be? Then I started experiencing Ghana as a resident rather than a visitor. And I would say that that was the moment when the little surprises started adding up, they started piling up. One of the first things I noticed was how much everyday life here in Ghana can feel slower. When I say slower, I don't necessarily mean worse, necessarily better. It was just different. Things don't always happen with the haste, the urgency that am used to. And I found myself thinking, why is everybody so relaxed? Why? Right here in Ghana. But along the line, I realized that I was actually looking at it from my own cultural expectations. And I would say that that would be one of the first lessons, okay? Sometimes culture shock isn't you discovering that another country is actually doing things differently. It is you discovering that your own way isn't the only normal way. You get it? But that was, I would say, wasn't the only thing that surprised me about living right here in Ghana. The bigger shock came from watching, how ordinary people get to navigate life, navigate everyday life, how people find ways to make things work. What I mean is that you see a house, it can become a business place. A small roadside space can become somebody's source of income. You see, the simplest skill, it can become a hustle. And when you start to notice all of these patterns, you are going to definitely see Ghana in a different light. Now, what I initially thought were random little things, they started looking like part of a much bigger system. And I want to say that that was when something actually changed in my thought process. I stopped asking, why do they do things this way in Ghana? And I started asking questions like, what happened here that actually made way of living, this way of living to make sense for the people? That question that I changed from that to this, it completely changed how I experienced Ghana, because the longer I stayed in Ghana, the more I realized that culture is not just festivals, food, clothes, or even music. Culture is what people do when nobody is explaining it to you. It is how the people get to make money. It is in how they raise their children. It is in how they communicate, how they interact with neighbors, how they solve problems, conflicts, how they get to celebrate, how they get to deal with moments of inconvenience. And sometimes you see those things that are, I would say, initially get to frustrate you. They are the things that are going to, teach you the most in that country. If you are planning to move to Ghana, you're planning to visit Ghana, or you're already here, and you wonder at times why certain things feel so different. My advice is that don't rush to judge what you do not understand. Don't make that mistake. Rather, watch, observe, ask questions. Because sometimes the biggest culture shock that you are going to, experience is not realizing that another country is different. It is you realizing how much of your own behavior you were thinking was universal. And that maybe, just maybe, may be the most valuable thing that Ghana has taught me. If you ever move to another country, I would love for you to tell me in the comments what was the biggest shock that you ever experienced. And if you want to see more of Ghana through my eyes, you get it through the eyes of Obinje, someone who has actually lived here in Ghana for years, then please do subscribe, because I am still discovering things about Ghana that I really never, expected. Anyways, thank you for joining me for this video. I'll see you again in the next video. Bye. When I first moved to Ghana, I used to think that the big things were the things that were most likely going to determine whether I was going to love living here in Ghana. I'm talking about the food, the people, the weather, the cost of life, the living. Guys, let me bust your bubble. It was the tiny things that actually changed my mind about living here. I would say that these are the things that are so ordinary that most Ghanaians don't even think about them. They don't give it a second thought. And the first one, I would say, it took me by complete surprise. And it is the way everyday interactions can actually feel very personal. You could walk into a place and you are expecting that, you're going to have a simple transaction and that will be that for that. No, but what happens is that you are going to end up having conversations, healthy conversations. It is very easy not to understand all of those things initially. I was used to getting things done and moving almost immediately. But I want to say that after living here for a while, I have started appreciating something about, life here in Ghana. Not every interaction has to be rushed or, in a haste. Sometimes the conversation is part of the experience of living here. Also, I noticed another small thing, the way people can turn ordinary spaces into something useful. What I mean is that a little space that you don't see any excess in it can become a shop. A front of a house can become a business, space. Someone can turn a skill into an income. Somebody sees an opportunity where another person is seeing an empty corner. For me, the more I noticed it, I started to realize that Ghana has taught me to look at ordinary things, differently, look at them from a different angle. But that is not all, okay? Here is where I would say it got even more interesting. It wasn't just the businesses that I was seeing. I was seeing the way people get to adapt here in Ghana. You see, you are going to see something that is not perfect. Obviously, it's not perfect. But instead of waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect solution, the people here are going to often find a way to, work around it. And this is you, looking at that thing and wondering, why is it done differently? Why is this thing being done differently? But eventually, you are going to start asking questions. How did these people learn to become this resourceful? And I want to say that all of these things actually changed my perspective because resilience is not always dramatic. Sometimes resilience looks like opening a small business right from your home. Other times it looks like you finding another way to make money. Sometimes it looks like you are just adjusting your routine because something did not go according to your plans. There was another habit that I did not expect that I was going to appreciate as much as I do appreciate it now. I'm talking about the importance of community. See, you are going to start realizing that people are not always operating completely, independent. Neighbors know their neighbors. Families right here, they are deeply connected. And in all of this connection, they get to show up for one another. Sometimes what looks like everybody knowing everybody's business from the outside, see, it can also be a form of social connection, social currency. Don't get me wrong, I am not saying that everything right here in Ghana is perfect. It's a far cry from that, okay? And this is because every country does have habits that can, frustrate foreigners, it can frustrate outsiders. But you see, that's what makes living somewhere different, okay? Now, when you're visiting, you're going to notice the attractions, okay? But when you're living in that country, you're going to notice the patterns, and those patterns, they slowly start to change you. And I want to say that that was what happened to me. Ghana did not just change my mind through one big moment, okay? It happened through dozens of tiny moments coming together. I would say a conversation, a business that I saw in an unexpected place. It could even be a neighbor, a family gathering that I observed or I witnessed, or it was a person that I saw that was able to create ways to solve ordinary problems. And eventually, I realized something. Sometimes a country does not get to change your mind by just simply showing you something spectacular. It changes your mind by seeing life differently. And that was what living in Ghana has done for me. So tell me in the comments, what is one small thing that you think Ghanaians, do that outsiders would never understand until they actually live here in Ghana for a period of time or even for years? And if you are enjoying this perspective of Ghana beyond the tourist, attraction, if you do not mind, please subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notification, and that is because there's a lot, lot more that I am still discovering. So thank you for watching today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. There are things that you are going to see in Ghana that would make no sense, absolutely no sense to you when you first arrive here. You're going to see the things, you're going to notice them, and in your mind, you're like, why is everybody doing this thing? But you know what is going to happen when you live here long enough? One day you are going to realize that now I understand all of this. I get it. I want to let you know that that was me for a time, okay? It has been one of the most interesting parts of living here in Ghana. Not necessarily the big tourist attraction that I came across. I wouldn't even say it were the things that people were documenting in travel videos, but I would say it could be the tiny everyday moments that slowly began to make sense. What I mean is that you can see businesses that are operating in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to operate. You will see that a home is not always just a home. You're going to notice that a small space isn't always just a small space that you are looking at it. People are going to find ways to turn something into something useful. Now, for the initial part, I just saw individual businesses, but down the years, I started seeing patterns. I started to see that people don't wait for the perfect conditions before they start that thing that they would want to start. They work with the available, okay? See, when you notice all of those things, that is when you're going to start to see it everywhere. Aside that, there are social moments. What I mean is that a social moment could be a simple visit that could turn into a healthy conversation, a gathering that can become much bigger than you had even anticipated or expected it, or it could be certain occasions that are not just about the occasions itself. They are about the people, the family, the friends, or even the community at large. See, I sometimes used to wonder why so many people were involved at first, but eventually I realized something. For many people showing up, it is part of the relationship that they have built. And then there were moments where I had to learn to understand everything, the rhythm of life. There are moments when Ghana can feel incredibly busy. You get it? And there are also moments when it feels like everybody has come together and they've decided that we are going to go slow, we're going to take our time. Now, for me, who was coming from a country where life is on a different level, it is easy to interpret all of this as inefficiency. But living here, it teaches you to look deeper, okay? Sometimes the pace isn't even the point, it is the relationship, it is the conversation, it is the human interaction. And you should know that that's something that I did not fully understand. Most people don't get to understand when they first arrive. But there's a bigger lesson. Living some other place other than your country, it changes what you notice. When you are a tourist, you are going to take pictures of the obvious things, okay? But when you are resident in that country, you're going to start to notice the invisible things, the habits, the routines, the little systems, the things that nobody thinks are interesting because they are just normal. And I want to let you know that those are the things that tells you the most about a country. Maybe that's why some of my favorite Ghana stories are not usually the dramatic ones that get people but they are the moments when I am simply going about my day and there's a thought that wow, this is actually interesting. Maybe I just saw something. Because you see, all of those moments tell me that I am no longer looking at Ghana from the outside. Rather, I am beginning to understand Ghana as somebody who is inside of Ghana. And I want to say that maybe that's what living in another country really does to you. You don't just learn about another culture, you discover how many things you once considered normal were just actually familiar things. Once you understand all of this, you're going to become much slower to judge the things that look strange to you. Rather, you become even more curious. And one of the things that life has taught me is that curiosity is probably one of the best ways to experience another country. I am curious right now. What is something that you feel is completely normal in Ghana, and at the same time you think a foreigner is going to find strange? If you do not mind, tell me all about it in the comments And don't forget that you can subscribe to the channel if you want to continue to explore the everyday side of Ghana with me, because sometimes most interesting stories they are hiding in plain sight. So thank you for stopping by to watch today's video, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye.